Let's bring in Arizona Congressman and a member of the House Judiciary Committee and the next chair of the House Freedom Caucus, Andy Biggs. Congressman, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Molly. Good to be with you.
Kicking things off, we'll start with really kind of the big moment of the week, the beginning of this hearing. It's the first hearing in the whistleblower controversy. Impeachment may be looming, and the Intelligence Committee chair steps up and gives a long statement, what he later says is parody. Take a listen. Here's Congressman Adam Schiff.
I don't see much reciprocity here. I hear what you want. I have a favor I want from you, though. And I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent. Understand lots of it.
It initiated this as if he were explaining this conversation between the president and the leader in the Ukraine, Zelensky. We actually then, it of course does not match what was actually released whatsoever. You have suggested now at this point in time introducing condemning and censuring Chairman Adam Schiff for this behavior. Why do you think that's important?
Well, normally I would say let's just debate this stuff out. We say things all the time that the other side disagrees with. I'm all for that. But in this particular instance, what the chairman did is he actually concocted a completely false narrative, threw it out there, and basically misled the entire republic about this transcript. He acted like he was reading from the transcript. Nothing he said was factually related to the transcript. It wasn't even his own interpretation of what was in the transcript. It was just a whole cloth false narrative. And it wasn't until he was pressed on it later on that he said, oh, I just meant it as parody. Well, you know what? Nancy Pelosi just said an impeachment inquiry is as serious almost as a declaration of war. And if this guy's up there throwing up a comedic statement and trying to make it and portray it to the world that it's an accurate statement, that is censurable, in my opinion. So on the bright side, the actual transcript as it's been released, or what we have available to read, this record as it's being pertained, is a quick read. It's only 5 pages, so the American people can read it for themselves. But it seems that as people on both sides of the political aisle have read this document, they've come to very different conclusions. So I just want to get your thoughts on what you see when you've read these 5 pages. Do you see a quid pro quo? Quid pro quo? Or do you see treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors? Of course, that would pertain to a potential impeachment. Or do you see a, quote, perfect conversation? What do you see? Well, I see a conversation that covers a wide variety of issues, and no, I don't see anything impeachable in here, and no, I don't see a quid pro quo. And don't forget, I mean, we were told literally the day before this came out, when Nancy Pelosi, the speaker, said, you know, there was quid pro quo here. You know, I had the feeling, well, we're going to see something that will show an explicit, you know, if you give me this, we'll give you that. And then they came out and they said, well, it wasn't explicit, it was implicit. And then they started using the term mob boss and everything. So they've tried to reconstruct a narrative based on a transcript that doesn't underlie the accusations that they made initially. And so I look at it and I say, I mean, I didn't find anything egregious here. I mean, he's talking about everything, congrats, blah, blah, blah. And it was just a normal conversation that you would expect between the leader of our nation and the leader of the Ukraine nation. Yeah. Part of the controversy here as well, the whistleblower implies that there was a lockdown of the conversation itself, that it was, you know, scandalous enough that they were concerned enough that it had to be put in a special system. The complaint also talks a lot about Rudy Giuliani. His name was mentioned also in that conversation between the president and Zelensky. Now, Giuliani's been pretty upfront about what his efforts have been. Take a listen.
No, I'm not concerned about my future. What I did is perfectly lawful, perfectly legal. I find it completely extraordinary that you're spending all this time asking me about what I did. All this time should be spent on the pay-for-play scheme that Biden set up, in which he made millions and millions of dollars using his son and having his son sell his office. That should shock you. But because we are distorted, this left-wing distortion that goes on, you're asking me about the process that I followed to uncover one of the biggest scandals. I should be considered a whistleblower. I should be getting whistleblower protection.
And, of course, an interview with Sky News that Giuliani had done. Now, just a few moments ago, one of your colleagues from the other side of the aisle did acknowledge that it doesn't look good that the vice president's son was working for a company in the Ukraine. Your thoughts as Giuliani starts to lay all of this out, that there's nothing to see here. He's the one that's exposing, he's the real whistleblower in this.
Well, I think that Mr. Giuliani actually was acting the way a private attorney would do to protect his client's interests. And so the interesting thing about the Biden case is it isn't that this was even secret. We actually knew about this months ago, and Mr. Biden, meaning the senior, Joe Biden, has gone out there and said that he did put pressure on the Ukrainians, and they did change, and they did fire the prosecutor who was investigating the company for which his son was on the board of directors. So that was laid out. I mean, so I understand all that. And then, you know, the server thing, you mentioned the server thing too. That's an interesting thing because this was a confidential record, and the reason it was is because they're talking about other nations. So Angela Merkel and the Germans were specifically mentioned. Normally that would be classified for the reason that if that gets out and gets leaked, as it has been, it causes both sides who are having a fairly frank discussion about this, it could cause a problem and friction with a third-party nation, and that's an issue.
Yeah, we wonder if Angela Merkel's being asked about all of this today and in the weeks ahead. We shall see. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us here today, Congressman Andy Biggs. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.